student at University of Phoenix, and I have to do a field experience for my schooling. I'm getting a bachelor's degree in human services. My first field experience, I worked at a assisted living center, and it was a bust. Nobody was there to tell me what to do. Nobody had suggestions. I would go in and just say, what should I do? And the receptionist kindly said, go visit the people. So I pretty much spent 8 hours a day, every Saturday, visiting the people, playing a word game with them, and feeling pretty useless. So when the second field experience came up, I determined that it would be better. So I looked at the list, and we had something on our list of places we could volunteer, and it was Stand Up for Kids. So I did an online application, and nobody answered me. So I waited a month, and I figured out where the house was, and I drove up to it one night after work, and they said, we're only open on Saturdays. Okay, so I came back on Saturday, and nobody was here. My goal is to get my master's degree in counseling and work with teenagers. I am so going to work with Stand Up for Kids, if I have to hunt them down and hog tie them. So I came back again and found some people just coming back from a car wash, and they gave me Tim's number to help me volunteer. So I contacted Tim, got into the orientation, contacted John, attended for a couple weeks. My class hadn't started. I went on vacation. When I came back, John was surprised to see me back because he thought I was just dissing it. But I'm here, my field experience has ended, and I plan to stay with Stand Up for Kids because it's just an awesome place to volunteer.
Well, as some of you, well, most of you know, I spent a lot of time at Central Arizona Shelter Services, CAPS, downtown. I spent about 9 months there. And during that time, I had met some of the youth that come in and out of the shelter. And they were like, hey, I think it was one weekend, sometime over the summer, they were like, hey, let's go to Stand Up for Kids. And I was like, what is that? And they started explaining it to me. And I was like, I don't know if that one's for me. So I decided not to go with them and kind of do my own investigation, on these whole youth organizations or whatever. I mean, it was the first time I was ever homeless in a shelter. But, yeah, so I went around checking out these different youth organizations. Started with Tumbleweed, and then I checked out Home Base. And Home Base was a no-go for specific reasons. And Tumbleweed was okay. It was just not the right feeling like that I have here now. But anyway, that's besides the point. I was hanging out there for a little while, and then for some reason or another, I can't remember why, I actually did come over here one day. I forget what was going on. I don't actually remember what brought me over here the first day, but I do remember why I started coming over here more often, and that was because one of my, I guess, bunkmates in the shelter, who was a couple blocks down from me, was Dustin, the other caretaker, and I actually helped him bring his clothing and stuff over when he first became a caretaker. So then after that, I would come over periodically, every other day or something, kind of hang out with him. Then I started to come on the weekends and get to know the staff members on the weekend. And yeah, that's pretty much my story of how I got involved in stand-up.
Growing up a lot of the time wasn't so easy for me. My dad had a really bad temper, could never hold down a job. Even now, remembering as far back as I can, I don't ever remember him having a steady job. At times I would remember being in bed at night, probably like 5 years old, and being afraid to get up in the middle of the night because I was afraid that I would disturb him, and that would cause him to wake up, and he would get his temper and maybe start beating at me. He's had a lot of bad mental disorders, but he never wanted to go get help. Yeah, at times he would beat my mother and I. For as badly as my father acted, I always had my grandfather. He was the good male role model in my life. Nothing was too big of a challenge for him. He could always fix things around the house. He was always great with people. He could always sweet talk and schmooze anyone. He's also lived a very interesting life. He's lived all over the world. He's met presidents. He and my grandmother lived in all types of interesting cities. My grandmother did Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis' hair in Thailand a long time ago.
Wow.
So, yeah, I always say if I had half the life that they have lived, I would be very happy. So, starting in 2000, my grandfather's health started to go downhill. He developed diabetes, then Parkinson's, and then Alzheimer's. It was a slow and painful decline to see him go through. In October 2009, he passed away. And at this time, I was going through many life changes. I just closed on a house that I had bought, and around the same time, I was still in training for my new job. And at the same time, I was also having some trouble with an on-again, off-again girlfriend. Once things settled down and I processed my grandfather's passing and settled into the job and finally got away from the ex-girlfriend, I started to have more free time and really thought about giving back to kind of honor my grandfather and all that he helped me with. So I started looking at life and I saw that, you know, anyone successful, they had help along the way. So I wanted to give that back. And also at the same time, this was around the time that United States, we elected our first African-American president. And I grew to admire Barack Obama and how he handled himself and just how he went about his campaign and his business. And that really inspired me secondarily to give back. So I found Stand Up for Kids online and just really jumped in with both feet, got involved right away, and the rest is kind of history.
It was Dustin, my own, and our other cast sibling Heather's first time to stand up for kids, and it was in the 105-degree weather in the summer of last year. And that's pretty much all I remember of it. It was just going to be a casual walk-in and visit. That's seriously all I remember of it.
What made you stop?
Probably because it got me out of CAS and it was cold, and food, water, entertainment. It was a tie-in for me to home base, except home base was too far.
I suppose the beginning starts with youth ministry. I was once a youth minister for a church, and I was part of this kind of deepening, almost radicalizing community. Kind of every activity that we would do, we would get like more fired up, more into it, and it was really cool to be part of that. So at one point we traveled to Australia for World Youth Day. And there's this point, I still remember it today, we're in this huge crowd of people. There are like tens of thousands of people in this giant parking lot with like the mega screens and stuff like that, and all kinds of sound systems. And, you know, we've been partying with the Pope earlier. Anyway, and I'd been in discussions with some of the teens talking about, you know, this feelings that I was having about like giving myself more radically you know, over to God. Anyway, when some of us were just kind of like struck by the Spirit and we sat down in the middle of this crowd, and I pulled out this notebook, and like 10 of us basically just started like brainstorming this way of living, this type of ministry, and that when we come back, that we were going to try to live. And it was based more or less that on the idea that if you deepened yourself in service, that would deepen yourself in prayer, and if you deepened yourself in prayer, that would deepen yourself in service, to kind of like drive both of those things. And so that was kind of like the beginning. So I come back, and then there were some books that I was reading, dangerous books with ideas, and the thing about ideas is that they often begin unclear, but even at the beginning, the end is already in place, if that makes any sense. And when I was reading these books and thinking about all of this stuff, I got the very solid calling, I guess, that I should give up everything that I had. so I could better serve my purpose in life, so I could better serve God. So it was around then that I was struck by the idea of being homeless on purpose. I had no clue what I was getting myself into, but somehow I knew that in the end it was gonna change my life. So, you know, the books, I had support from my then girlfriend, who was later my fiance. When I asked her to marry me, I was actually homeless. She said yes. Anyway, and something like a calling mixed between those things. At the end of 2008, while I was applying for graduate school, I moved out, and I didn't move back in. To this day, I can't really articulate exactly why I did it, but I just kind of knew that I had to. So 6 months of my homeless life is sort of a different story. I won't belabor it here. For this, it will suffice to say that my adventures included mice, rain, rashes, bushes, snakes, cops, office floor, and old naked men. That's more or less my story. But, you know, you have an experience with snakes, you know, rain, and old naked men, and that changes you a bit, right? It makes you see things differently. So to say that it changed me is an understatement. And as I was talking about with Michael, I didn't really know the difference that it had made, even while it was happening, or even right after it had happened. And I really didn't actually know the difference that it made until somewhat recently. So when one of my public speaking students walks into my office for my office hours and says, "Oh, hey, there's this awesome organization, I think you might be interested. It's called Stand Up for Kids." Everything was kind of already in place, and the die had already been cast.